off if that makes you feel. So we wanted to record this because we know that it is the 12th of December. People are incredibly busy at the moment. And we had a lot of interest in this event and a lot of people going, are you recording it so we can watch it later because we can't join you in person? So we'll be recording it, we'll be sharing this. The research findings are already on the website, and so we're really looking forward to a good conversation. So you have a bit of a sense about how we're going to run it. We're going to start off by presenting the key findings from the research. So that will be me along with Dr. Jeanette Darcy, who's from University of Liverpool and one of our research partners. Also on the chat and able to answer questions about the research as we go is Becca Harris from the University of Liverpool team. So we'll present the findings, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Natasha Early, and Natasha's going to talk through the National Device Bank because we wanted to give you a rounded sense of what Good Things is doing in this space. But I think what's really important to say is while we obviously do want to use this to raise awareness of the National Device Bank, one of the things we really wanted to do through the research and we want to continue to do is really raise awareness of the potential and opportunities more broadly around supporting reuse of technology and around that being used to fix the digital divide and support digitally excluded people. And we very much see ourselves as a part of a wider ecosystem here, a wider ecosystem that will include in-house device banks led, for example, by local authorities or by NHS Foundation trusts. It includes different repair and refurbishment cafes, many of which have been doing what they do brilliantly for a long period of time. So there's a mixture of different sorts of organisations in that wider ecosystem, but we know it's uneven, and we know there is so much more we all need to do in order to make this part of business as usual for organisations in terms of how they think about their IT equipment. So it's with those two things in mind that we really wanted to conduct this research. So with no further ado, I will go on and talk through the background to the research. So some of you may know that earlier this year, we had the privilege of working with the Global Circular Electronics Partnership with pro bono support from Deloitte in order to explore this issue around reusing IT equipment to bridge the digital divide. Oh, sorry, someone's got their volume on. Great. So we wanted to explore this issue from the perspectives of predominantly commercial sector businesses. And so that was the first report we did, Circular Electronics for Social Good. And so then over the summer, we had a brilliant opportunity to work with the University of Liverpool to build on that research. And whereas the first piece of focus largely on business, commercial sector perspectives, this one we really wanted to focus in on public sector organisations and public sector perspectives. So now we have these two companion pieces of evidence. So what we really wanted to do, therefore, was think, okay, well, what we learned around the enablers and barriers for commercial sector organisations, does that hold true? Can we understand what are the opportunities for public sector bodies to reuse their IT equipment? Are there any differences in terms of those enablers and barriers, different things they need to consider? And also to keep moving forward on what are the wider policy recommendations that might encourage more of this? And we were really driven, going back to our first work with the Circular Electronics Partnership and Deloitte and our ongoing work with the University of Liverpool, to think about this in a wider context of two important issues. Really, they could not be more important. One of those being around reducing e-waste and the other being around fixing the digital divide. And for many of you who know Good Things Foundation already, you know we're the leading digital inclusion charity in the UK. We've just celebrated our 12th birthday, and we feel passionately about how we can enable more people to cross that divide really and experience the benefits of digital inclusion. And it is still so shocking and worrying that over 10 million people lack even the most basic digital skills. 1 in 14 households have no home internet access. At least 2.5 million households are struggling to afford fixed broadband. And we know that having a suitable device is part of that, both in terms of those on lower incomes and those facing digital barriers may be much more reliant on only smartphone use, meaning that a lot of children, a lot of adults do not have a suitable device for learning and earning and the sorts of things that everyone in this call will probably be taking for granted. But we also know from the organisations in our network that nearly 7 in 10 of them are saying that not having sufficient devices that they can use, that they can give to people who face digital barriers is really holding back their work. So that's been a massive motivator for us. But alongside, we're also really conscious that, electronic waste is now one of the fastest growing waste streams on the planet. And so much of that can be addressed through much smarter, more circular approaches to technology. And so it's really about that kind of motive to both reduce e-waste and fix the digital divide, bringing those together that sets the context for the circular electronics for social good model. And this is where we got to in our earlier work with Deloitte and with the Circular Electronics Partnership, really thinking about the donation, reuse, the extended life use as part of that electronics value chain, thinking about the different stages in that process and which elements of those might best be done by the organisation itself or through civil society organisations. And also thinking, you can see in the box there on the right, the different enablers and barriers that stood out for business organisations around this. And one of those still being awareness. So that's the circular electronics for social good model. And in this new research with the University of Liverpool, looking at public sector perspectives, one of the top takeaways was that actually that model holds. But within that model, different public sector organisations might follow many different pathways through that overarching circular electronics for social good model. And that those pathways would reflect different choices about how involved public sector organisations wanted to be at each stage. They might reflect in particular different choices around data security, with some wanting to do their own in-house wiping before then passing devices on. It might reflect choices around costs and capacity, that being a particularly important issue for public sector organisations, of course. And you can see here the quote around, if we can find a way to do this that's free, that's what we're looking for. One of the other key takeaways was that there were very strong motivations among the people we spoke to around wanting to explore and make reuse and donation work, make it happen. And that these would be a combination of digital exclusion, but also net zero goals and giving back to communities. Largely, the barriers and enablers were similar to those in the private sector. And again, the same message that we had from the earlier work, that no barriers were insurmountable. So organisations that want to do this, that feel it's the right thing to do, can find a way forward. But down at the bottom there, you can see our A, B, C, D, E. And these were areas of additional considerations that public sector bodies might need to think about, starting with the fact that these are assets purchased with public monies, and therefore they want to check and make sure that they are using and disposing, including donating them, appropriately. Bureaucracy came up a lot as something that people needed to push through and work through, especially to make this business as usual. Costs and data security I've already alluded to briefly, but maybe one thing to say in the costs area is also about this, the trade-off and people reaching a point where they felt that the social and environmental value and benefits of donation and of reuse outweighed what some described as the rebate they might get, so a percentage of the profits from resale of IT assets for recycling. And the last one around equity is really interesting and really important, because a lot of public sector organisations were motivated and very much aware of the risks of exclusion, especially as their own services were going more and more online. And so thinking about equity, thinking about devices having to be a good enough standard for people who lack digital skills and confidence, but also about a device itself not being enough, about that needing to be paired with data, about it needing to be paired with wraparound support. Those considerations were also really important for public sector bodies. But I think one of the other really interesting things from this research, and I'm about to hand over shortly to Jeanette Darcy to pick up the story from here, is that whilst we do in the report identify some areas of sector differences, so NHS, higher education, national agencies and bodies, local, regional government, overwhelmingly, the differences between sectors were less significant than those between individual organisations. And I think that really came to the fore when we were considering the enabling factors. Over to you, Jen.
Hi, thank you, Emma. That was fantastic. And hello, everybody. Thank you for coming this afternoon. I'm Jeanette Darcy from the University of Liverpool, and I get the lovely part of the presentation where I get to speak about what people told us was really working for them in their organisations and the 5 C's that emerged from this research as to what has enabled this sort of work to move forward in those organisations. So one key element is organisational culture, and particularly culture around risk. So all public sector bodies have to be concerned with data security, with managing risk around that security when they're opting to put devices for reuse. And everyone we spoke to absolutely understood the importance of those concerns, the importance of full compliance with policy, with legal and regulatory requirements. And their main concerns were about the secure wiping of data. But that wasn't insurmountable. So one enabler that we found for many organisations was the reassurance of partnering with reputable organisations that have fully certified processes and assurances. And those might be local or they might be national schemes. And in some cases, they provided that kind of secure process complete from end to end. Or some organisations might feel more secure taking on the data wiping in-house and then passing those on to a partner. But that confidence in the security of the data wiping process was really a key factor. And that was also helped by up-to-date knowledge within the organisation about technology and about the processes that are available now in that area that really can provide that security, whether that be in-house or whether that be through collaboration with those external partners, which is our next C, collaboration. So whether that is external, there were also key enablers in terms of internal collaboration. So that might be between different departments like assets or estate management, procurement, legal, etc. And where there were difficulties in starting these processes, that could be because it was difficult sometimes to find who the key decision makers were. So people may be identifying assets that they'd like to donate, but they might not know who to go to for permissions, etc. But once those collaborations were in place, whether they be internal or external, then momentum could really start to build and that scheme could really start to take off for that organisation. Next slide, please. So our next C then is champions. And everyone we spoke to was really passionate about the good that can come of these device reuse schemes. So not just in hitting those official KPIs that are to do with social and environmental impact, but people are genuinely and personally passionate about wanting to make a difference, whether that be in their communities or in their organisation, depending on where those reuse devices are going to end up. So these champions that we identified were found in a variety of positions, and they really are skilled in lots of different ways, but particularly skilled in navigating bureaucracy, which could be a barrier, and in motivating others as well, really being able to make the case for the benefits of these sorts of schemes. And then our next C, when you get a champion in a senior role, a chief, that really can be a real boost in terms of getting those decisions over the line, cutting through that bureaucracy that can be a barrier. So those kind of combinations of champions and chiefs can be really enabling. And then that last key enabler that I'd like to talk about are those kind of catalysts, the things that can be taken advantage of. I know nobody wants to talk about this anymore, but COVID really did come up quite often. It was raised lots and lots of times as something that people spoke about where maybe the shift to remote working had raised awareness for them of their own IT assets, of their own disposal processes, or maybe they'd been asked during COVID to donate to local schools or local charities. So awareness of that digital exclusion in their local area was raised, but it was a catalyst for many organisations in kind of identifying ways in which these schemes could work. And similarly, refresh cycles within organisations can be a kind of organic point at which to consider moving to a different model. So if you're replacing laptops after, say, 3 years or 5 years, that's a point where those assets might be assessed, contracts can be considered, and it kind of creates space. And similarly then, some stress the importance of various regional initiatives in encouraging and in creating space for thinking about that kind of work in their organisation. So I know we've got coming up in a little while on our panel, we've got people from Liverpool City Region, from Birmingham, and from the London Office for Technology and Innovation, and they'll be able to talk about the kinds of regional work being done in their areas that can maybe help to create these kinds of catalysts that were emerging from this research as being real enablers. So I'm aware of time and I'm going to sum up. So for my part of the presentation, so in summary, we found those 5 key elements of culture, collaboration, champions, chiefs, and catalysts that really emerged as key enablers for public sector organisations. Back over to Emma.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jen. And so, so our final slide here, really then thinking about recommendations. Within the report, you'll find a longer list of recommendations, and we've tried to think about what public sector organisations are doing and can do, and also thinking about how government can create the conditions for more of this to happen as well. So some of the things that many of you in the virtual room already will already be doing or exploring is to think about how you build device donation, if you're not already doing it, into your approaches to sustainability, to social value, to thinking about it through mechanisms like procurement. How you identify the pathway which best suits you, your culture, the choices that you would need to make, your own costs and capacity. And what you'll find in the report is hopefully some really useful checklists which will help you to consider some of the different factors in order to be able to identify that pathway. The other thing that we've really learned is the value of opportunities like office moves and IT asset refreshes as catalysts, and also the importance of at least taking a first step and then seeing, as we know that many do, that actually this is straightforward. I can take a second step and a third step, and I can start to build this in. And a final point there about sometimes we heard from organisations about, you know, one of the barriers being current contracts. Some organisations had got over that by renegotiating contracts in order to flex and support donation, working with suppliers in a different way. And others then thought, well, if we can't do it now, let's at least build it in to future approaches around the use of our IT assets. There's a really big message here about what government can do, and already government is doing this locally and regionally and nationally, thinking about leadership in Wales and Scotland, thinking about Greater London, you know, Liverpool, Greater Manchester, West Midlands. There's lots of different parts of the country where we are seeing leadership from government as well as through health and higher education. However, we really want to see more from UK government and from different departments. And there are specific responsibilities here for DEFRA, which leads for UK government on the greening government agenda, and how you know, updating their framework or building this more clearly into future strategies feels an incredibly important thing to do. And also work that the STAR team, Sustainable Technology Advice and Reporting team, which is a team that works across different government departments, what they could be doing around showcasing examples here. And in the top right, and most importantly, a reminder that the reason, one of the key reasons this is important is we cannot underestimate the difference it makes in the lives, in the opportunities, in the everyday experience of people who then benefit through receiving a suitable device with data and with wraparound support. So at that point, I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Natasha. And Natasha will take us from the research that we have been proud to be part of into then thinking about the other aspects of what Good Things Foundation is doing in this space before we then move to the panel. So over to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Emma. So before I get into the detail around the National Device Bank, I just want to give a little refresher on the Good Things Foundation strategy that we relaunched last year. Most of you in the room will be very familiar with Good Things Foundation and that we're a digital inclusion charity with a mission to fix the digital divide. But not all of you may be aware that we refreshed our strategy last year. And we had 3 core ambitions around that, where we wanted everyone to have the internet access that they need. We wanted everyone to have somewhere local to go for support to use the internet. And we wanted everyone to feel able and safe online. Now, to deliver on those ambitions, we needed to rethink our service offering, and we needed to ensure that we covered off those 3 elements of access to data connectivity, access to a suitable device, and also continuing access to the valuable skill support that's provided through the National Digital Inclusion Network. So we reorganised our service offerings and created a national digital social infrastructure. And that combined together the National Data Bank, the National Device Bank, and the Digital Inclusion Network, continuing as it has done for over 10 years now. Now, when we first started with the Device Bank, it was very much an emergency response, and it was built off the back of crowdfunding and organisations donating funds. And we were able to secure and distribute around 22,000 devices. Going back to what Emma shared previously about the e-waste, but also the carbon emissions that are generated in the production of a device, we felt that that wasn't sustainable for the future. And so that's when we chose to realign our National Device Bank with a more sustainable approach moving forward. So I'm going to go on now and share a little bit about what the National Device Bank is and how it works. So the National Device Bank is a method of IT asset disposal that tackles e-waste while supporting people that are digitally excluded. The National Device Bank accepts used IT equipment and devices from organisations of any sector. It's a secure, sustainable and socially responsible solution for organisational electronic waste. And we're really, really lucky that we can work in partnership with Reconomy to process the assets and ensure a robust end-to-end service for contributing partners to the Device Bank. Once we've securely accepted and processed devices, we refurbish those suitable for digital inclusion or leverage proceeds to purchase devices already out there in the refurb market, and we distribute them out to community organisations in the National Digital Inclusion Network, along with a 12-month warranty and, really important, after-sales support. So these organisations work directly with digitally excluded people in their communities, and so they're able to distribute the devices effectively to those most in need, and if necessary, they can pair them with data connectivity from the National Data Bank and provide free skills support to get started using the device, and that's often using Good Things Foundation essential digital skills platform Learn My Way. Devices are given to people without access to their own device. And this is so that they can get online and connect with jobs or training. They can engage with friends and family online. And they're also able to access essential everyday public and health services. As many of you know, we work at scale. And as of the end of September, we had 361 digital inclusion hubs delivering the National Device Bank in their local communities. And through this, just under 6,000 donated devices have already been distributed to digitally excluded people. That said, we've got a long way to go. Each time we run around, we get 5 times more demand than supply. And so we're always looking out for new device contributors. So Emma, you can stop sharing the slides now if you like, and I'll just talk through the research response. So coming to the research, it was really uncanny. I felt that it absolutely echoed my experience of conversations with public sector organisations. But one of the things that I'm really glad that it highlights is that organisations can and do choose their own pathways. They can explore what works for them. I truly believe that there's just no absolute reason not to reuse tech for social good. And so I'm also pleased that that was highlighted through the research, that similar to the private sector, for the public sector, whilst there may be hurdles and barriers to overcome, that none of those are insurmountable. And what I'm really, really most pleased about through our discovery calls is that we've really encouraged organisations to have a good think about their approach to e-waste and consider reuse, helping organisations to understand what works for them, even if it isn't partnering with us, is vitally important, because we want to see the bigger picture. We want to see everybody reusing. And if they can reuse for social good, then that's a great thing. It doesn't have to be through Good Things Foundation. It can be through any number of local ecosystems. But making that happen is vitally important. That said, I've also been really lucky to collaborate with committed and progressive champions who have been persistent and consistent in taking steps forward. And that is a lot of the time what it takes, that persistence and consistency in moving forward, even when there are barriers. And there is definite momentum. So I can see signs of it in our own pipeline. For example, we've now got 8 London boroughs with device bank agreements in place, and Liverpool City Region embarking on their first collections, as well as a number of NHS, ICBs and trusts starting to inquire and starting to make progress down that journey. So for us, I think the key to unlocking the potential for environmental and social impact will be organisations committing to finding a way, and then effective cross-departmental collaboration. Once that happens, I'm absolutely confident that all of you can become pioneers.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much, Natasha. And I am delighted now to be able to hand over the chairing role to Helen. Helen, over to you. Great timing.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Emma. But it's been great. I've been here I caught the end of the presentation as well, which is fantastic. So apologies for being late. Fantastic to have this research to bring the public sector along private sector. And we've got 3 great panelists. So we're just going to hear 3 minutes from each of them to hear from their point of view. So first panelist, I believe, is Genta. Genta from Lottie, the London Office for Technology and Innovation. It's fantastic to work with you, Genta, in all kinds of ways. But just over to you about refurbishing and reuse of technology from your perspective.
Of course, thank you very much, Helen, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. So at the London Office of Technology and Innovation, we've been working with the Greater London Authority and Good Things Foundation since I think probably early 2022 to develop what we now have and call Get Online London. So that's the London instance of what Good Things Foundation are kind of doing across the country. As part of Get Online London, we deliver the usual devices, SIM cards and digital skills to Londoners wherever they may be. And that's really, really important to us. And that distribution of all these 3 elements is via a really large network of digital inclusion hubs, which is made up of voluntary and community sector organizations across London. And again, that's this is why we chose to work with Good Things, because of their expertise and experience in developing the digital inclusion network. A little bit about the device bank and the London kind of pipeline of devices. We've been trying to build that since June 2022. And to date, I think some startling statistics around 18,000 devices is what we've collected, but we've distributed around 3,500 of those devices to Londoners via 150 digital inclusion hubs. And you can see kind of immediately what jumps out of those figures is the device conversion rate. So not everything that we collect from our donor organizations we are able to distribute out, and that's really it's a really good thing in some ways, because our Reconomy, our refurbishing partner, has a very, very thorough process for making sure that devices that go to Londoners are not only safe, but they are also usable and fit for purpose, helping residents apply for jobs, undertake training, maybe even work from home. So it's really, really important that we have that thorough kind of investigation and thorough process for refurbishing devices. It's really, what's really good to see from the research is almost that kind of confirmation that what we've experienced here in London is not unique. and the challenges are faced by others across the public and private sector. I just wanted to highlight a couple that have been particularly kind of important to us, or things that have been sort of coming back again and again. We found that the cyclical nature of IT refresh in London boroughs is sometimes an issue. When we started this process, we had one large borough who wanted to donate devices, but their IT refresh cycle was 3 years away from that time that we started the kind of discussions. The other barrier we're finding day in, day out is also that kind of insistence from boroughs to bring back the devices that they donate to their exact borough. And again, looking at kind of operationally around this, that sometimes is difficult, because again, the Digital Inclusion Network and the VCSs that are part of that, they need to then apply themselves. So it's not a compulsory process that we need to distribute those devices to that particular borough. It's very much a kind of opt-in, if you like. So again, those two are linked together. Governance and sign-off processes were mentioned, but one thing I'd kind of highlight is just finding the right person who can sign things off is difficult. And we've been really lucky to work with our colleagues at Good Things, with Natasha and others who've been kind of really good at holding people's hands and guiding people through the process, navigating the governance, navigating the many different legal documents and things like that, and assurances that people need to have in place. But overall, I think we've been really, really pleased that we've had partners like Good Things Foundation, but also Greater London Authority, because they've been able to connect us with the private sector organizations and also public sector organizations like the NHS. I think Natasha touched on this, but they are becoming quite a crucial partner in helping kind of advance our kind of operations in this field. And then what I'd like to say is that, having the support of boroughs, despite all of these challenges, the need to have rebates and the lack of devices and whatnot, I think what it's been good to have is that willingness from boroughs. And, I mentioned all these challenges, but we've already had over 3,000 devices, I think, from 3 boroughs already. And we're in discussions with half a dozen who want to donate more. So yeah, I'll probably leave it there and
fantastic.
The rest.
Lovely, thanks, Genta. That's brilliant, and I think that it's great to have the research, absolutely fantastic, but also it's great to hear firsthand that the NHS is able to donate devices, that universities can donate devices, that the police force can donate devices, and of course boroughs and councils can. So one of those councils that is doing something is Raj in Birmingham. So over to you, Raj. So tell us briefly about what you've been up to at Birmingham City Council.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, Birmingham has been quite busy in this area for a while now. And just with quick reflection on the report, I think it summarises really well a lot of the thought processes that we had. A lot of them were articulated as well as this, but these were things in the back of our minds, and how we address them. It's good to see some of this in writing, because it does enable us to apply some kind of consistency in the thought process there. The one area that I thought was really important was that strategic approach and that buy-in from chief officers and senior people. Far too often in local authorities, certainly, digital inclusion is always something at the back that we do, but it's always kind of hidden in commission activities, maybe some organisations funded to do digital inclusion activities, and it tends to be focused at elderly people rather seen as a universal thing that we need to address. So I think that report does really help us to take that further forward. For Birmingham, our journey really started with sort of COVID. As I say, we've always had some form of digital inclusion, but it was never that well coordinated, and it was quite siloed in its approach. COVID really accelerated that approach for us. We recognised that digital inclusion wasn't just an issue for elderly people, and we've already heard that it's every member, every sort of person in the community at different levels that will need access to devices, and it's a whole spectrum of different things. We took some early research ourselves in terms of what and how we should respond, and one of the things that we learned was that In terms of skills, there are about 80% of all the organisations that focus on digital inclusion was all about skills, and less than 20% even looked at things like making devices available or providing any kind of connectivity. And already there was a massive dearth in that kind of capability. And then certainly when COVID hit, what we found is a lot of the organisations that provided digital inclusion support, the skills capability, weren't able to deliver anything during those times because they had no access to machines, they had no access to places where people could access the devices. So it became a real issue, and the whole skills side became a real issue for us as well. So as a result of that, Birmingham took a strategic decision. It took cabinet reports, it took political buy-in, and it took legal buy-in to get this process. And Birmingham's always sold on their devices, so we got commission for devices. So this was a radical step for us, and having quite a big estate, I think 11,000 staff, and the machinery we have, there's a lot of devices that we have, both desktops and laptops across the organisation. So we took that strategic approach based on the evidence that we had to say, look, we really do need to support this capability. We explored a number of options about how we do it. So we looked at in-house, we worked with our organisations that we commissioned our devices to see what those costs were. And we got a range of different costs from, you know, people willing to do it for free for us to charging us a particular amount. However, a lot of other factors that you've sort of highlighted, the report kicked in, the risk averseness, issues around data, protecting ourselves in terms of what we do with our devices, and taking responsibility for some of the devices out there. So we took a decision that we would do all our stuff in-house. So we recruited people to look at our devices, they would do all the assessments, they would wipe all the devices. And then our next challenge was, how do we get these devices out to people? And one thing that we were really keen was to make sure that we approached the devices to the right people and the right organizations rather than a free-for-all. It's a horrible saying, but we wanted to make sure we targeted the right people and the right organizations. So we set up a criteria, a website that enabled organizations to make sure they were bona fide organizations, provide that assessment and criteria, and started allocating devices out through that process. We were careful that all our devices were cleaned up properly. We offered to put an operating system on, a free operating system on, or provide advice in terms of how an operating system could be put onto those devices. But one of the things that we did do was to ensure that the other issue about ownership, we put in processes that once we handed out those devices, they became owned by those different organizations. So BCC took no further responsibility, because one of the concerns was the cost of devices coming back to us, repairs, and what happens when things goes wrong. So we were very articulate in the way that we put our process together and say, look, this is your device now, you manage that process. So we've done a lot of work around that. We had some early lessons around that. We trialed it. We trialed our desktops and our laptops. And what we found that even the organizations didn't really want desktops. They wanted the agility, and laptops were far more beneficial for them. And we've to date allocated something like almost 3,000 laptops in the space of 11 months to organizations out there. Over 200 organizations have benefited. So that's the approach we've adopted in Birmingham. We were lucky that we got political support, and that enabled us to attract funding as well. So we've been doing that, and we have had conversations now with our external partners, the NHS being one of the ones, to see how we can start accepting devices from other organisations perhaps, and then look to see how we can recycle them as part of other organisations and become the hub to support that kind of capabilities. Those models are being developed at the moment, and we're looking to see how we can take those further forward. So that's our story today.
Fantastic, thanks Raj, that's brilliant. And a long learning journey that you've got there that you're sharing with everybody. So our last panelist is Rob Benson from the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. So over to Rob to just tell us briefly about your experiences.
Thanks, Helen. Good afternoon, everybody. As Helen said, yeah, I'm Rob Benson. So I kind of lead a lot of our work around digital inclusion in the Combined Authority. So we cover 6 local authorities in the city region and are led by our Mayor, Steve Rotherham. Obviously, our kind of vision very much chimes with other panelists around how we obviously want to ensure that no one's left behind. And I think access to devices is a key element of that, and making sure that, you know, our organisations, ourselves, but then our partners and our local authorities are kind of engaged on this front. We do have a kind of city region digital inclusion network, lots of different organisations that are a part of that, helping tackle the digital divide. And one of our kind of points within our kind of digital inclusion pledge that we have is around consideration around donating devices where appropriate. Now, we know that's not going to be for everybody, but we want to be able to support organisations with partnerships like the Good Things Foundation with local charities to make sure that it's on their radar and that we can guide them through to really put those devices in the hands of our residents to support them on their digital journey. I think in terms of the report, it's a really fantastic report, and there's a lot of key takeaways from that and recommendations for partners, for organisations across the public and private sectors. I think, you know, in terms of speaking from the Combined Authority and, you know, working with Natasha and obviously, recently signing into donating to the National Device Bank has been a real eye-opener in terms of, what the processes were in place prior to that with our IT teams. And I think, you know, it's never really sat well with a lot of people that, you know, we've opted for a lot of usual disposal routes, you know, given a public sector organisation of destruction of hard drives, throwing things away. And obviously that doesn't help anybody, you know, it doesn't help that net zero aim of environmental waste, and it certainly doesn't help the people that can really benefit from these devices. So, you know, we're really proud to be obviously, you know, helping support the National Device Bank, but then other organisations and leaving that door open to engage with charities and partnerships and really lead from the front within our rest of our local authorities and organisations across the public sector who are doing a lot on this kind of agenda. But organisations need to find out what works best for them. And I think the report touches on a lot of that, because there isn't a kind of one size fits all on this. You know, there are, as Emma mentioned before, there's lots of concerns over data security, privacy, who wipes the devices, you know, so people need to find the right way, what works for them. And that might be going through different charities. It might be going through an organisation like Economy and the Good Things Foundation, because there's lots of different legal assurances that we've had to kind of overcome. And I think, you know, building on kind of Raj's point around that buy-in, that senior leadership buy-in, that political buy-in, to make sure that it is taking and embedded as seriously as possible, because as we find with a lot of things across digital inclusion, you know, it's sidelined a lot of the time, and it's a nice to have, when actually it needs to be something that is absolutely built into all our processes. Much like social value is now becoming to the fore in terms of an issue like this, it needs to be embedded within that there's organisations that are available to support them and overcome any of those kind of legal kind of queries and kind of assurance queries that we're dealing with. And then I think building on some of those recommendations, it's looked at the kind of processes where you can build that in terms of your life cycle. So looking at what we're trying to do here is, yes, we'll make a kind of bulk donation in terms of the existing devices that we've got, but looking for the future to say, okay, a few years down the line, when we're looking to reuse and repurpose devices and buy a new kit, that actually it just becomes part of the process, that, you know, a portion of our kit will be, you know, donated in, it will support into the device bank, it will work with these organizations and obviously house them into a better home. Because whilst, you know, we know a laptop that we might kind of sweat for 4 or 5 years, you know, might not be of much use for us as an organization, it can be of massive help to individuals that don't have anything at home to access things like universal credit, to apply for jobs, to speak with their friends and family. So I think touching on those kind of recommendations is absolutely massive. And then that sustainability point is really key as well. So, you know, in the city region, we've got a kind of target level by the Metro Mayor around, meeting net zero by 2040, which is about 10 years ahead of national government. So the only way we're going to actually try and achieve that is by tackling things like environmental waste and disposal, which play a part in that. So looking at how we can obviously meet that goal, embedding in other services like procurement in terms of social value, and then, you know, really weighing that up in terms of it's a net benefit, this kind of offer. You know, it just makes total sense. It's the right thing to do. And also the fact that, you know, there's so many different avenues to go about doing it, whether that's through yourselves at the Good Things Foundation or kind of the work of the amazing charities in the voluntary sector. So yeah, a really great report, and you know, really happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. That's really, really brilliant to hear. And I think that as you said, and as obviously Emma said earlier before I got here, there's lots of different routes. And I think that you know, the great news about National Device Bank is like that end-to-end process is kind of sorted. But obviously with Raj, the buy-in you had to do it yourself in-house to get that buy-in at that senior leadership. I'd actually like to ask all the panelists, great that you're all here on the screen. So you talked about buy-in. I guess, is there any advice you would give to any public sector organisation on the Zoom call today? Sorry, there's some noise here or something, about how to get that buy-in, and then also about reporting. So obviously you're already doing it. Is there any like reporting, like net zero reporting or ESG reporting that you need to go back to your committees and councils or your leaders about? So just on that buy-in and that reporting piece, who wants to kick off? Raj, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we did right at the beginning is do an environmental impact assessment on the approach that we're doing, because we do have a net zero targets that we want to achieve. So that was one of the things that we did, absolutely. And the buy-in aspect was really important. The way we did that, and this is really important, that there's lots of national reports, and there are fantastic national reports around the Lloyd's ones, stuff that the Good Things Foundation produced. The bit that really made the difference was the lived and the live stories from people. And that's what we went out and achieved. What we did in writing and taking this approach was get the experience of people and the impacts it was having of not being connected. And those people who did recently get connection, what difference it made. Having those stories was the bit that really got the buy-in from the councillors. Otherwise, it was, oh, everybody's got connectivity, you know, it's not a big issue these days. I think when they heard those stories, that's when it brought it to life. So that's one thing I would certainly do and advise to yourselves is to get those real stories and get those people right in front of your senior people to get them doing. The other thing in terms of reporting, absolutely what we do is make sure that we report back on a 6-monthly basis about the achievements we've made. Make sure it's, and that goes all the way to Cabinet. So Cabinet are aware, these are published reports that make sure that people know what's been achieved, the impact it's having on people, and the difference it's made on their lives. And there are some fantastic stats that have come out of people who were never connected before and the difference it made to their lives. So that's the approach that we've taken, and it's certainly an approach I'd certainly recommend.
Okay, brilliant. Genta, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to build on Raj's point, and again, these are my views from Lottie, and Lottie is not a borough in itself, but it's a collection of 27 of the 33 London boroughs. But one thing we did at the start of the pandemic was to develop personas. So these personas that really highlighted the nature and scale of digital exclusion that people in London, in different areas of London, are facing. So that we've heard from boroughs, from our member boroughs, that that's been really, really helpful in making the case to their chief financial officer, to their chief executive for more digital inclusion support. And we've seen kind of new teams being set up in different boroughs to tackle digital exclusion. And then the other thing I'd add on the buy-in is we've seen kind of really good well-designed approaches and kind of capacity and resource in those boroughs where digital inclusion is part of their corporate strategy rather than just digital kind of strategy. So that's a bit of insight on that in case it's helpful to others.
Fantastic. Rob, I might come back to you first, Rob, with another question. Just Julie in the chat panel said, how do councils fund the refurbishment of devices? Obviously working with the National Device Bank, that's completely free for councils. So we sort all of that out for you at that National Device Bank level. Raj, you actually mentioned that you actually were getting money back, so obviously you had to persuade someone about that. Because we're running out of time, I actually just want to ask you all about the future. So let's look at the future. I mean, that we're just about to make all of our New Year resolutions next month. So just thinking about plans for the future, are you going to continue to donate devices, reuse devices? Is there anything else that you're planning? So Rob, let me come to you first.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this is something that we see as a really long-term plan. You know, obviously we're working very closely on all areas of digital inclusion generally, and this is a key pillar of that ask, not just for us as a combined authority, as a organization with an IT estate, but, you know, for our partners as well, and about encouraging organizations, our businesses, our enterprises to really bring something to the table in terms of that challenge. You know, we try to approach this to say that, you know, we're leaving no one behind. And I think prior to kind of, you know, the previous panelists points around the personas and the impact that this can have, I think, you know, the key point for us is to keep banging that drum, because, you know, once we can showcase the impact that something like this can have, that, you know, it just makes total sense to actually, you know, be the right thing to do, but also to have really positive net outcomes in terms of individuals receiving devices, organizations, as you mentioned, in terms of Good Things Foundation, having, you know, no cost to them. It's a win-win in terms of some of that kind of offer through economy, but then also meeting some of their net zero, their corporate social responsibility, their social value asks. And I think, you know, building that in for us in the future is around how do we embed this not just more for our organization in terms of our corporate responsibilities, but then to outreach in terms of the rest of the Liverpool City region, in terms of our other local authorities, to kind of show, look, you know, we've done the hard work, we've done this, why can't you? And then to bring that kind of ask for the organizations and businesses in the city region to really think about this going forward, because as we know, unfortunately, the issue isn't getting any better in terms of digital exclusion. So it's important that we all kind of bring something to the table on that.
Fantastic. Raj, what's your plans for the future?
Yeah, I mean, echo lots of stuff that Rob's already said. For us, because we were a funded program, I think we are exploring different options moving forward. So we are looking to see what kind of relationships we have. Certainly, working much more closely with the National Device Bank is an option for us moving forward. So the current approach in the short term, we are going to continue. One of the things that we are doing is aligning it with more of our strategic activities. So our warm spaces is one area which is an outreach place where we are supporting the most vulnerable. And what we are trying to do is make sure there is a digital offering in all of those warm spaces. So that's part and parcel of delivering a device connectivity and the skills that go with it. So there's a real opportunity there, and we're trying to embed that in those type of areas. So that's our next step. And the other thing that we have done, which is a new thing, is that we've started to recycle our smartphones as well. So again, across the council, it's a pilot at the moment to see how effectively we can do that. Again, we are looking at ways that we can make sure that's sustainable moving forward, but it's something that we are starting to do as well.
Fantastic, that sounds great. And Genta, to you, what are your plans for the future?
Really, really good question. So we're very lucky that Get Online London has funding until June 2025, and we're really, really excited to see well, actually, like Raj in Birmingham, we are exploring options for making Get Online London a permanent and sustainable, financially sustainable service over the long term. So I think there'll be more on that in the next couple of years. But I think another thing that we're doing alongside Get Online London is to support boroughs to help them embed digital inclusion in their social value, particularly tech procurement, because I think someone mentioned in the chat that's an incredible area to kind of leverage value from. So we're doing active work with the boroughs right now to help them do that.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's been such a great conversation today, because a few years ago, if you talk to, I'm going to say public sector organisations because that's the theme for today, but you know, they weren't alone, private sector organisations as well. If you ask them to donate their devices, there was a sucking of teeth and going, oh no, we wouldn't be able to do that. I think the fact that so many public sector organisations realise how important it is to not leave people behind, how important it is to overcome some of those barriers. There's a question in the chat panel about certification and making sure the data is cleaned properly. Obviously, all of that is now just standard. You know, working yourself, Raj, you'll be doing that. We work with Economy and National Device Bank. There's other disposal companies who will refurbish as well and provide that certification. So again, that feels that that's a standard thing now, that's understood. But the need of people, so we know at the National Device Bank that all of those community partners right across the country, we have 5 times the demand for devices than we're able to give out with the current flow of devices in. So that the demand, and particularly at this time of year, it feels so sad that there are people who do have the skills, but just don't have the money to be able to afford a connected device at Christmas time to connect with loved ones. I just want to make a plug for the National Data Bank as well. So obviously, the great thing is that we can bring that together. We can bring the devices together with those free SIMs. Hopefully making it into a connected device. We're gonna share the recording with everybody. Of course, you know, Good Things Foundation will be plastering it on social media, so making sure that everyone can get the recording, can get the report. There's lots of great things in the chat panel as well, and we know there are people here who are also doing amazing things at a local level, NHS, councils, universities. So I'm actually, you know, no more sucking teeth, right? So this is the time to be merry and goodwill and to give. So if you're coming on today and you haven't started, there's lots of good practice here. Lots of people who are there to help you to get that next step. And I'm feeling like 2024 is going to be even more positive than we've had this year, creating such amazing services. So thank you so much to the panel. Thank you again to Raj and to Rob for coming along. Thank you to everybody who's presented today. And we'll be sending you an email with the links to everything. And have a great Christmas. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great Christmas, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.